Could the Philadelphia Eagles remain active here this offseason and pull off a monster trade that would send a ripple effect across the National Football League to continue to bolster what is already a fantastic defense? According to reports and rumors out there, Jalen Ramsey rumored to be on the trading block as the Los Angeles Rams potentially look to retool that roster with the player who's really expensive and at points this year look to be unhappy with the situation, even though the Rams won a Super Bowl last year and are still the defending Super Bowl champions. Jalen Ramsey also adding fuel to the fire by saying this on Twitter in mid-January. It is what it is. This was his response to these trade rumors surfacing. It is what it was. If that's the end, I went out with the bang, still that. So does that mean that he's going to retire? Or does that mean that his time and tenure with the Los Angeles Rams is coming to an end? Jalen Ramsey, no doubt, has been one of the best cornerbacks in the history of the NFL, certainly during this modern offensive-laden era. In 2016, fifth-round pick out of Florida State by the Jacksonville Jaguars, helped them make it to the AFC Championship game back in 2017, where the Patriots defeated Jacksonville, then lost to the Eagles in the Super Bowl. So far in his great NFL career, he's a three-time first-team All-Pro, six-time Pro Bowl selection, and won that Super Bowl last year. As for what he did this past season, I thought that Jalen Ramsey, when I watched him, wasn't as engaged as I would have liked to have seen him, but he ended up having a pretty good roster and a pretty good year this year in terms of his roster statistics, right? Completion percentage of 62.5, 659 yards allowed. He did give up 5 touchdowns. So that is very rare for a player of the ilk of Jalen Ramsey to have that number there on his stat sheet. 4 interceptions and 18 pass breakups. He does have a knack for making a play on the football. Now, if you do trade for Jalen Ramsey with what is already an Eagles roster that has a lot of questions going into the offseason as far as which players are going to sign, which players they're going to look to retain, which players are going to let go, they do, as of right now, have the 4th most cap space in the NFL. And Jalen Ramsey is an expensive player because when he is engaged, this guy's fantastic. Jaire Alexander, average annual value, highest paid cornerback in the NFL, $21 million per year. Denzel Ward just behind him at 20.1. Jalen Ramsey checking in at 20 even. Marshon Lattimore, 19.5. Marlon Humphrey with 19.5 as well. Now, of course, you have Darius Slay under contract, but James Bradberry is set to be a free agent. So if James Bradberry on the open market were to get $13 to $15 million per year, and you let him go, and you want to trade one of your bevy of picks to the Rams, who need them, because you know less need, F them picks, and you bring in Jalen Ramsey, and you're paying him $5 more million in James Bradberry, then it does kind of make financial sense for a guy who is a little bit better than Bradberry. As for Howie Roseman, you can never rule him out. Why? He's always aggressive, especially in targeting cornerbacks. Howie Roseman has had a very fascinating tenure in Philadelphia. He was seen in the good graces of fans. Then he was exiled to the different side of the NovaCare complex by Chip Kelly, won the Super Bowl in 2017. Everybody wanted him gone after the Eagles struggled following that Super Bowl championship, and now he's in the good graces of this fan base once again because he has put together an absolutely stacked roster. In the same sentiment that you can bring in Jalen Ramsey for a little bit more money than James Bradberry, would you rather have James Bradberry for less, considering what he did this year, and knowing that he has familiarity with this defense and played very, very well opposite of Darius Slay? What a bargain deal by the aforementioned Howie Roseman to sign Bradberry to that 1-year, $10 million contract, 3 interceptions this year, 17 pass breakups, so he's right up there with Jalen Ramsey. A Pro Football Focus coverage grade of 80.2 and an overall Pro Football Focus grade of 74.2. If you can find a way to move forward with these cornerbacks here and maybe draft one in the 1st or 2nd round, I like the future of this Eagles defense. Darius Slay is getting a little bit older, but this year still played at a Pro Bowl, All-Pro caliber level. James Bradberry was right on par with him, honestly, in my opinion. I think he slots better as a cornerback 2 as compared to a cornerback 1, but I do think that Bradbury might be able to get cornerback 1 money this offseason. And Avonte Maddox, he signed that extension a couple of years ago, a very good nickel for this Eagles team. And the Eagles' pass rush combined with the secondary, that's the recipe for success. Like in 2017, this is an Eagles team that had a subpar secondary outside of Malcolm Jenkins, who did play a lot in the slot and around the box because he was just an all-around playmaker. But what was one of the pillars of the Eagles' success that year? They had a really good defensive line who got that pass rush home, which then allows the secondary to not feel that pressure of having to trail all these wide receivers for a long period of time. So if you get that pass rush home, quarterback doesn't have time to really break down the defense, and you can cover on the back end. That's what makes this Eagles defense very difficult to go up against, and that's why they have fantastic defensive numbers so far this year. What do you think, Bird Gang? Would you trade for Jalen Ramsey? Let your voices be heard and be honest with me down in the comment section. T for trade, P for pass. Sound off down below. Now let's take a look at the Super Bowl 58 odds before we take a look at some Senior Bowl players who the Eagles could target in the NFL draft. The over-under, it's really started to increase. So is the line. It's changing, right? There's been a lot of movement here. Over-under as of right now, 50.5. Philadelphia Eagles are the favorites at -1. The Chiefs started off as favorites, but then some money poured in on Philadelphia at -1. There's also a lot of really good prop bets for Super Bowl Sunday, as there always is. And if you want to make those bets and check out those props, do so with our sportsbook partner, BetUS, 125% deposit bonus if you head to chatsports.com/EaglesBet with the promo code Eagles125. You put in $100, you get $125 back. That's $225 to game with. All right, right now on Eagles Now, going to take a look at some defensive players first in the Senior Bowl who the Eagles could look to target in the NFL draft. And then we'll also look at a couple of quarterbacks who the Eagles could look to bring in to their quarterback factory. Player number 1 that I want to talk about is an edge rusher who I'm intrigued by, who you might be able to get later in the first round. It's Isaiah Foskey, the edge rusher out of Notre Dame. His production in college has been really impressive. And sometimes I think you look at some of these athletes and you look at some of these players as projects and who they can become. And they might not have that college production, which I think is taking a risk, right? As for Foskey, yeah, he's a 4-year player at Notre Dame, but a reason why I like him, I know that he can get the job done. I know that he can rush the passer. Why? He's done it at a high level with the Fighting Irish. 6'4", 257. I've seen some clips of him from the Senior Bowl. Is pretty quick coming off that edge. 4-year player at Notre Dame. Good size. 10 sacks in 2021. 10.5 sacks in 2022, and 28 tackles for loss over the last 3 years. This is a player who's played in a lot of big games at a really high level in college football, and it's a guy who continues to produce. And why I also like that continued production is because he'd be able to help you in year 1. Look, Robert Quinn didn't do anything for this football team. At least hasn't up to this point. Maybe he comes through with the Brandon Graham-esque play against Patrick Mahomes. So let him walk in free agency. Draft a guy like Foskey who can be cheap, a plug-and-play guy who can be a part of the depth along that Eagles defensive line as a rookie. Staying on the defensive line, how about this beefy defensive tackle, Keeanu Benton out of Wisconsin? This guy's huge, ranging between 320 pounds, depending on which measurements you look at. 4.5 sacks in 2022 with 2 pass breakups. Keep in mind when we're talking about defensive tackles now and going into the future, Fletcher Cox, free agent, Javon Hargrave, free agent. Thought the BGN had a good breakdown on Keeanu Benton, the Beefmaster, Beefy Benton, as we like to call him. Figures to be a fast riser in the draft season. The Badger defender anchored Wisconsin's defensive line and is one of the best pure nose tackles in the country. As NFL teams shift to bigger interior defenders, Benton could establish himself as a premium player in this class. And if you want to move on from Hargrave, or you can't pay him, and you can't afford Fletcher Cox, or you believe that he's on the tail end of his career, you have Benton if you draft him. You have Milton Williams, who's shown some flashes, as well as Jordan Davis. That can be your defensive tackle rotation, and then maybe another cheap addition in NFL free agency to bolster that depth a little bit. Now to some quarterbacks. Malik Cunningham is an intriguing player from Louisville, has the most touchdowns in the history of Louisville, well over 100. You know who also went to Louisville? Lamar Jackson. So he's a really good athlete. Certainly needs to fine-tune his mechanics and become a little bit more accurate, but that's a quarterback who could be available late in the NFL draft. Clayton Tune is a guy who could also be a mid to late rounder who's a good distributor of the football. He is pretty accurate. And then Max Duggan out of TCU was a Heisman finalist. I did see him play live in the Big 12 championship game. He has some decent touch on his deep ball, but to me, he's more of a college quarterback who needs a little bit of refining. He was good in the college football playoff semifinal against Michigan, making some plays with his arm, making some plays with his legs, as he is a dual threat. Really what's impressive this year, all throughout the year for TCU, which is why he was a Heisman finalist. But then when he played against Georgia in the national championship game, he looked overwhelmed. He missed a couple of big throws downfield. Certainly concerned to see how he translates to the NFL level. But as a backup, he can be better than a guy like Ian Book. And if you use a late round pick on him, not a lot of money that you're having to pay him either. You might as well take a chance at the league's most important position. So speaking of positions, what positions do you think the Eagles need to target in NFL free agency? Let us know down in the comment section. Bird Gang, we always love hearing from you, and don't forget to subscribe.